Hey there. I want to begin with something real and raw today. Growing old is a gift. It's the reward for having survived storms, celebrated victories, built homes, raised children, healed wounds, and loved with our whole hearts. But aging doesn't just bring silver hair and soft knees. It brings clarity. Clarity about who we are, what truly matters, and, most importantly, who we allow into our sacred space. Let me say this loud and clear. Just because someone shares your DNA doesn't mean they deserve a front row seat in your life. Family can be our greatest blessing or our deepest wound. And if we're going to age with dignity, peace, and joy, we must get intentional about who we walk with. So today, I want to talk about 5 people you must avoid in old age, even family. We've all had that person in our lives. The one who never seems satisfied, no matter what we do. The one who makes our joy feel too loud, our choices too strange, our growth too inconvenient. They carry a magnifying glass, always searching for flaws, for evidence that we're still not enough. And when we think we've finally earned their approval, when we've hit the milestones, made the sacrifices, or done the hard thing, they move the goalpost. Again, it's heartbreaking when this person is a stranger. It's devastating when it's someone you love. And it's soul-shattering when that person is family. See, there's a particular pain that comes from wanting to be seen by someone who refuses to take off their judgmental lens. It's a deep H, a kind of loneliness that lives inside the presence of people, not the absence of them. Because what we're craving isn't just company, it's connection. It's being loved for who we are, not for how well we perform, how obedient we are, or how little we disrupt their worldview. And the constant critic, they don't offer connection. They offer comparison. They offer control. They offer conditional acceptance. And as we grow older, the cost of trying to please them becomes too high. The toll it takes on our nervous system, on our confidence, on our peace. It becomes unbearable. I want to say something hard, but necessary. You are allowed to walk away from anyone who makes you feel small in the name of love. You are allowed to create distance. Even if they share your last name, you are allowed to say, I'm not having this conversation. I'm not accepting this tone. Or even just no. Not to be rude, not to be dramatic, but to be well. Because peace is a decision we make over and over again. It's a boundary we reinforce when we hear that same old voice of disapproval and choose not to let it shape us anymore. We don't have to fight. We don't have to explain ourselves. We just have to choose self-respect. And sometimes that means silence. Sometimes that means space. When we stop chasing the approval of the constant critic, something magical happens. We start hearing our own voice again. We begin to trust ourselves more. We feel lighter. We laugh more freely. We make decisions without bracing for backlash. We become ourselves again. Fully, fiercely, beautifully. You don't owe anyone your joy, your energy, or your presence if they only know how to use it against you. Love doesn't sound like shame. Love doesn't feel like fear. And love doesn't come with a scorecard. So if someone's honesty is a disguise for hostility, if their advice always leaves you second guessing yourself, if their love comes with terms and conditions, hear me when I say it's okay to outgrow them. It's okay to walk away. You don't need anyone's permission to protect your spirit. And you certainly don't need to apologize for choosing peace over perfection. Your worth isn't up for debate. Not anymore. There's a certain kind of emotional weight that sneaks in quietly and settles deep in your chest. It's not rage. It's not grief. It's guilt. And not the kind that nudges us to make amends or take responsibility. I'm talking about the kind of guilt that's handed to us, pressed into our palms by someone who calls it love but uses it to control. You know the feeling. That sinking sensation when a family member says, after everything I've done for you, or if you really cared, you would. It doesn't matter how kind you've been, how present you've tried to stay, or how many times you've rearranged your life. to be what they needed. To them, it's never enough, because it was never really about love. It was about leverage. Guilt trippers are masterful at flipping the script. They'll paint your boundaries as betrayal, your healing as rejection, your independence as selfishness. And when you try to explain, when you try to say, I need space, or I need to take care of myself right now, they twist it into abandonment. They don't want relationship, they want possession. And they use your sense of duty, your tender heart, good, as a leash. But here's what I want you to hear: obligation is not the same as love. Performing roles, checking boxes, and showing up out of guilt is not the same as connection. And if someone is only close to you when you're doing what they want, that's not intimacy. It's control. You are not selfish for having needs. You are not a bad daughter, son, sibling, or parent for creating boundaries. Boundaries are not a sign of weakness. They're a declaration of self-respect. And the truth is, the people who love you in a healthy way will never ask you to betray yourself to prove your loyalty. There is a difference between sacrifice and surrender. Yes, love sometimes means compromise. It sometimes means choosing others over ourselves for a moment. But it should never mean chronically abandoning your own voice to keep someone else comfortable. That's not love. That's emotional manipulation dressed up as family values. As we grow older, our energy becomes sacred. We don't have the emotional bandwidth to continue investing in relationships that operate like emotional bank accounts. We deposit care time and presence, but withdraw shame, resentment, and burnout. Aging is not the time to shrink into the expectations of others. It's the time to rise into who we really are. And that often means confronting the people who benefit from our silence. There's nothing ungrateful about choosing your well-being. There's nothing disrespectful about stepping away from relationships that suffocate you. And there's nothing wrong with wanting peace more than you want to preserve an illusion of family unity. Let them say you've changed. Let them say you're different. You have changed. You're no longer willing to be emotionally blackmailed. You're no longer interested in keeping the peace at the expense of your own soul. And you're no longer confused about the difference between love and guilt. Because love doesn't twist. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't shame you into showing up. Real love says, I see you. Even when you say no, even when you need space, even when you choose you. So go ahead. Choose you, not because you don't care, but because you finally do. There is a unique kind of emotional heaviness that comes from being in a relationship with someone who always sees themselves as the victim. Someone who chronically refuses to take accountability for their actions, their choices, or the consequences of their own behavior. These are the people who, no matter the circumstance, always find a way to center themselves as the one who's been wronged. They spin every story to fit a familiar narrative. Poor me. If something goes wrong, it's someone else's fault. If there's tension in the room, someone else caused it. If they're unhappy, it's because the world, or their family, or you, didn't do enough. And what's insidious about this dynamic is that it's emotionally exhausting to be around because you can never win. No matter how supportive, compassionate, or patient you are, you will eventually become the villain in their story. Why? Because victimhood is a lens they refuse to take off. And when someone lives behind that lens long enough, they lose the ability to self-reflect. They stop asking, what's my part in this? And start demanding that everyone else change to accommodate their pain. And let me tell you something difficult, but freeing. It is not your job to carry someone else's emotional wounds just because they've refused to tend to them. It is not your responsibility to keep shrinking your truth to protect someone who refuses to face their own. As we grow older, the weight of one-sided emotional labor becomes heavier than we can afford to bear. Our capacity for drama, for circular conversations, for emotional hand-holding with people who don't want to heal, it all shrinks. and rightfully so. Because our later years are meant to be about truth, tenderness, and tranquility. Not tiptoeing around someone else's inability to take ownership of their life. The person who always plays the victim becomes a magnet for attention, but a vacuum for accountability. They drain the air from the room and the life from the relationship. Because in their world, someone always has to be blamed. And if you're in close proximity, that someone is often you. And the trap is subtle. You start to feel guilty for having boundaries. You start second-guessing your words, questioning your tone, walking on eggshells, trying not to set them off. And before you know it, you're doing emotional acrobatics to protect the person who refuses to even try. But here's the true thing. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And empathy does not require us to martyr ourselves. Yes, we can love them. Yes, we can feel for the pain they carry. But we are required to absorb it. We are not required to make ourselves small so they can feel big. We are not called to sacrifice our own emotional well-being just to keep the peace. You don't have to attend every emotional crisis they create. You don't have to respond to every accusation, every guilt trip, every spiral. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for them and for ourselves is to step back and let them sit with the discomfort of their own choices. Because growth doesn't happen in blame. It happens in responsibility. And until someone is willing to look in the mirror instead of pointing the finger, they will never evolve. And the hard truth is, you can't force someone to grow just because you love them. Let them tell their stories. Let them play their roles. But don't let them write you into the script as the antagonist just because you're choosing peace. You are allowed to release the responsibility of holding someone up who has never tried to stand on their own. You are allowed to say, I love you, but I will not carry this with you anymore. And you are allowed to walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. You're not being cruel. You're being honest. You're not giving up. You're letting go. And sometimes that is the most courageous act of all. There's a kind of loneliness that comes with loving someone who can never love you the way you need to be loved. Because their love is always centered on one thing, themselves. A narcissist is someone who sees the world through a lens that magnifies their own importance while dimming everyone else's. To them, relationships are transactional. Love is not something to be shared, it's something to be used. It's about what they can get, not what they can give. The narcissist can be charming, captivating, even charismatic. They often come into our lives with grand gestures, with promises of admiration and attention that feel like the validation we've been longing for. But soon, you begin to notice that the love they offer is conditional. It's tied to your ability to meet their needs, to keep their ego fed, to constantly reassure them of their worth. And as soon as you stop performing or stop making them the center of your world, their affection vanishes like smoke. You start feeling like you're walking on a tightrope, constantly trying to balance between meeting their demands and keeping your sense of self intact. But with every compliment they offer, there's a catch. Every praise has a shadow. Every act of kindness is followed by a silent debt you owe them for having received it. And before long, you realize that what you thought was love was really a game of control wrapped in the illusion of admiration. What's painful is that they never truly see you. They see the version of you that feeds into their narrative, the version that validates their worldview, their needs, their sense of superiority. Your dreams, your emotions, your pain, those are afterthoughts, things to be managed, minimized, or ignored. The narcissist cannot see you in your fullness. They can only see how you fit into their story, their need for admiration, their need for validation. And that's where the damage begins. Because when you're constantly giving your love to someone who cannot return it with true empathy or reciprocity, you start to lose sight of your own worth. You begin to feel like a supporting character in someone else's movie, always waiting for their recognition, never fully stepping into your own light. You start shrinking your needs, your voice, your essence to fit their narrative. And in the process, you lose yourself. But here's what aging teaches us: we can no longer afford to be invisible in our own lives. Time becomes more precious, and we begin to realize that the energy it takes to care for someone who cannot see us for who we truly are is energy we can no longer spare. The weight of constant emotional labor, of walking on eggshells, of being in a relationship where your needs are always secondary. It drains us. It makes us sick, physically and emotionally. It wears down our spirit. This is where we must make a hard decision. Do I want to keep trying to make someone see me when they've never been interested in seeing me as I am? Because the truth is, no matter how much we love them, no matter how much we try to prove our worth, a narcissist will only love us as far as we feed their ego. They can only love us when we're in the role they've cast us in. And once we step out of that role, once we stop playing the part they want us to play, they will punish us with silence, indifference, or rejection. But here's the most empowering thing I can tell you: you are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's distorted view of who you should be. You are allowed to demand that your love, your energy, your care be reciprocated. You are allowed to choose to be seen. Not as a supporting player, not as someone who exists to make someone else feel important, but as you, fully, unapologetically, and completely you. A narcissist's love is a love that demands, not gives. It takes and takes, leaving you feeling empty and unseen. But real love, true, it is expansive. It nurtures. It supports. It lifts. It sees you for who you are and loves you without expecting you to be anyone else. And this is the love you deserve. This is the love that is worth fighting for. This is the love that comes without strings attached, without manipulation, without demands. So yes, you may have loved a narcissist. You may still long for the love they never gave you. But I promise you this: you will never find peace until you allow yourself to be loved by people who see you. People who love you for all of you, not just the parts that serve their needs. And sometimes that means letting go. Even if it feels like a loss, it's not a loss. It's a reclaiming. It's a reclaiming of your worth, your joy, and your freedom. There are people in our lives who hold on to the past like it's the only story worth telling, the only truth worth remembering. These are the historians, people who define you by what you were, not by who you are becoming. They have a way of bringing up the past in conversations like it's a script you're supposed to replay on repeat. They don't see the evolution of who you are. They only see the person you used to be. Every conversation becomes a history lesson, one where they bring up the mistakes you made, the times you stumbled, the times you weren't perfect. They hold on to the version of you that was hurt, confused, or lost. And they won't let you forget it. But what's even more devastating is that they won't let you forget it either. The historian's love feels like a cage made of memories. They may tell you, "I remember when you were like this," or "I know how you used to be." It's as though your worth is tied to your past behavior, your past mistakes, or the things you've long since grown from. And what they don't realize, what they refuse to see, is that you're no longer that person. You're not the person they're holding you to anymore. You've grown. You've changed. But here's the painful reality. When we live in someone's shadow of our past, we can't fully step into the light of who we are becoming. The historian doesn't just remember the old you. They demand you stay there. They want you to remain in the stories where you weren't strong, where you made mistakes, where you weren't your best self. And by doing that, they limit your potential. They tie your growth to their perception of who you were, and they rob you of the chance to be who you want to become. This is a subtle kind of emotional manipulation. It's not always malicious, but it's damaging all the same, because it forces you to play a role in someone else's narrative. It keeps you stuck in a cycle of guilt, shame, or self-doubt because you're constantly trying to prove that you're different from who they say you are. But no matter how much you've changed, no matter how much work you've done to heal and grow, they'll only ever see you as the person who made that mistake, who failed at that thing, or who used to act that way. And as we get older, this becomes more and more suffocating. We realize we can't keep reliving the same chapter of our life over and over again. We can't keep being defined by our lowest points. We can't keep apologizing for who we're when we've worked so hard to become who we are now. And what's even harder is that the historian doesn't just hold on to their version of you. They try to make everyone else see you that way, too. They turn your growth into a threat, a challenge, something they can't accept. So you start to feel stuck. You start to wonder, why can't I move on? Why can't they see me for who I am now? And the longer you stay in that pattern, the harder it becomes to shake off the weight of the past. The historian's version of you becomes a prison, and every time they pull you back into the old narrative, it's like shackles tightening around your soul. But here's the key to understanding this dynamic. You are not obligated to stay in someone's past version of you. You are not defined by the mistakes you've made or the hurts you've suffered. You are not bound by the labels they place on you. Growth isn't a linear path. It's a series of steps, some forward, some backward, but always towards something more expansive. And as we age, we realize that we no longer need to prove ourselves to anyone. We don't need to beg for recognition of who we've become. We don't need permission to move forward. And here's the hard truth: you can love someone and still outgrow them. You can love the historian, but you don't have to stay stuck in their narrative. You can acknowledge their pain, their memories, and their perspective, but you do not have to live in it. You have every right to step into your future, to create your own story, and to surround yourself with people who see you for who you are today, not who you were yesterday. Sometimes this means having a conversation that's long overdue. Sometimes it means gently but firmly telling the historian that while you appreciate their love and their memories, you are not the person they're holding you to anymore. You have to set boundaries. You have to say, yes, I know I made mistakes. Yes, I know I was once lost, but I am not that person anymore. I am me, and I am becoming more and more of the person I was always meant to be. And sometimes it means stepping back from relationships where you're not seen, where you're still being held to an outdated version of yourself. Because the truth is, you can't continue to grow and thrive if the people around you are constantly dragging you back into the past. You deserve to be seen, to be celebrated, and to be loved for who you are right now, not for the person you used to be. You deserve to have people around you who see your potential, who cheer for your growth, and who help you continue to expand. You deserve to be in relationships that allow you to evolve into the fullness of who you are becoming, not to stay trapped in the pages of a book that's already been written. So release yourself from the historian's hold. Free yourself from the chains of their past perception of you. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to be who you are becoming. And that is the most courageous and loving thing you can do for yourself.